Good morning. My name is Tom Richmond. I'm here with Ryan Dell. We're here with the Cal Tribe podcast. It's the first one since for a few years, so we're rebooting that. And we have with a special guest, John Lunt, who happens to have been the 2012 race director at the London Olympics. He's based in London. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Tom. Morning, Ryan. Nice to see you both.
Morning, you too.
And John, at least one out of the two of us is handsome, as you said. That's not me.
Good. And the weather's hot in England as well.
Oh boy.
John, why don't we met last year at the 2025 TIA conference in the UK, and you were super kind to give me a ride back down to London, and that was your mistake. And so we had a great chance to connect and learn a little bit about your background, and I wanted to share that, especially with the Olympics coming up here in Los Angeles. You were the 2012 race director for triathlon at London. And I'd love to know when that process started and how that process went.
Um, well, it started in 2008, the beginning of 2008, when London won the bid in 2005, July the 6th, I think it was. So I actually thought Paris was going to win the bid at that point. But lo and behold, London wins the bid. And then probably a lot of people in the world of sport said, oh shit, what we're going to do now? Now we've got to put it on. So yeah, the recruitment process, you had to apply for the job, and that was at the beginning of 2008. I think I had about four interviews and was eventually appointed competition manager for the triathlon at the Olympics in April 2008. So I think I was probably at it for about 4.5 years of organisation for 4.5 hours of racing.
Now, John, if you were appointed in April of 2008, did that mean you had a chance to go to the 2008 Olympics?
Yes, I think that was a bit of a masterstroke from the organising committee. You could go out and see how another OCOG delivered the Olympic Games, not just your sport, but you see how the other sports and how they all integrate, and you see how the transport system works, and you see how the accreditation works, and how the technical officials are moved around, and how the TV process works, and you just see how a multi-sport games is all put together in the space of 3 weeks. Yeah, it was a phenomenal undertaking, especially if you imagine going to Beijing. It was a long time ago, so I suppose they were just evolving. Things have moved on since 2008, but they're still a fascinating country, and obviously English is not their primary language, so there were a number of challenges there. The culture is very different as well. Remember, the IOC is very organized. Well, the Chinese are as well, but it's very much a French English production. They're the two main languages. If you throw in Chinese as well, then there it can add another layer of complications to a very complicated and complex event anyway.
How many folks were on, say, organizing your organizing team, and then how many overall volunteers did it require to put on a triathlon in London?
So for London, I think I was the 150th full-time employee, and I think by the end there was 6,500 employees. There were 75,000 volunteers. The triathlon itself probably had about 200 full-time member of staff working on it. Just the sport, my area of sport, we had 21 staff who were all from the world of triathlon. So you can imagine the sheer numbers of managing all those people is considerable. It's a massive beast when you look at for London there were 26 sports. In LA there will be 36 sports. So that's a jump of 10. So that adds another increase in complexities to a complex organization. So I suppose the easiest way to describe it is you're putting on 36 Super Bowls every day for 3 weeks. And how do you integrate all those different sports without them getting in the way of one another. It's a bit different when you have a venue-based sports for taekwondo and boxing and judo, because you're inside a venue. But when you throw in the marathon, cycle time trial, the road race, the triathlon, the marathon swim, and so on and so on, all those have got to function somehow. You've got to get the athletes there, you've got to get the technical officials there, you've got to get the spectators there. And of course, they're going for one sport, but that could impact on another sport. So it's that integration of all those complexities that's why it takes so long to put the Olympics together.
And just to recapitulate, how many full-time employees versus how many volunteers just for triathlon? And when did those full-time employees get brought on? Is that a full-time employee 3 months out, 6 months out, month of?
So the sports department, my sport delivery team of 21, they were all appointed at least a year out, and they were full-time in the final 6 months, and they were part-time in the build-up into those 6 months. Of those 21, there were probably about 4 who were employed 3 years out.
And then
That's
again on the volunteer front, just to produce the triathlon, how many volunteers did it take to do that?
just under 2,000, because it's not just race day, and obviously race day is 2 days for males and females. But in LA, you will have the para tri as well, and you will have the mixed team relay. You have all the sports specific volunteers for the event, but then you will have other volunteers for transport and protocol and opening ceremonies. So there'll be a vast number of volunteers within, well, they call them FAs, functional areas, but they will actually be departments that will be brought to your venue to deliver their part, their level of expertise into your sport. Does that
Now,
sort of make sense?
originally, it does, and originally, I think in 2018 in the U.S., um, we were told that Long Beach was going to be the location. It was a 10-year run out, and the NGB said, hey, look, over the next 10 years, come and race here at Long Beach. They called it Legacy, and this is going to be the Olympic location. And then I think last year that was changed to Venice. Does the NGB select the location, or is that mostly by the IOC?
The location. So when the bid is put together, the NGB will have an input into that where they think it's probably best. So the bid committee will put a bid together to win the bid. Now, there will be the International Federation will have an input into that for sure. And if they are happy with it, then that's what will go forward. When the city wins the bid, then the reality kicks in of, right, now we've got to work. Now, there will be a number of alternatives that could work equally as well. And then the organisation will look at the venue logistics and will say, okay, we've looked at Long Beach, but Venice Beach works better for us. Now, I believe Long Beach will have the beach volleyball, and I think Venice Beach will have the start of the time trial and the start of the marathon. So the venue team will be looking at how they can integrate those 3 sports into Venice Beach, and triathlon would fit nicely into that, rather than beach volleyball that will have at least 14 days of competition before they have their final, and they'll have a massive grandstand as well. They'll have a massive venue. Well, once you build that massive venue, you can't do anything else with it or around it. So that's why it looks like Venice Beach has been chosen. Obviously, the home of triathlon all along that coast. That's the heritage of the sport along there, from Malibu all the way. You know it better than I do. So I think that's why it's moved to Venice Beach. But then, I'm sure Venice Beach will have its complications with tides and currents and the environment there of how you make it work. Every event or every Olympic event has its own challenges, its unique challenges.
Yeah, so last week, so one of the reasons this was timely is last week, World Triathlon announced that there'll be a test event in July of 2027. And you and I had talked about the importance of that, in the winter and the spring. So there'll be a test event next July of 2027. I would imagine that the organizers will learn a lot about the logistics there through that test event.
Yeah, I always said it's fundamental to the success of the delivery of the Olympics that you have. The more test events you can have, the better you can test everything. Whether it's testing out the course, where the athletes get a chance to ride on the course, you can work out all the potholes and the manhole covers and all the turns, and you can just, the more you can test the event, the better it will be at the end of the day. Yeah, so it is fundamental. I know Athens only had one test event before their race. I don't think Tokyo had a test event at all, if I remember correctly. Now, London, we were blessed with quite a few number of test events, and Hyde Park and the Serpentine is well known for sporting events. So we got to know the venue really, really well. But so next year, when it's delivered, then a number of the functional areas for the Olympics will be involved. Probably something like transport will get involved, and something like technology, and also the volunteers, they will get involved next year, just to see how their departments work and cope with the sport of triathlon.
Well, John, you had mentioned earlier about the home of triathlon in Southern California, and I know that you're British, there's an ongoing thing with the French, but we still have to give them credit for that in the early 1900s for founding Les Tres Rivières, I believe, there, and the way that San Diego gets away with being the home of triathlon is the word modern. If you just put modern on that, then you could say triathlon began in 1975, I believe, but actually began quite a long time earlier than that. But live and learn, right? The current world triathlon, you're very familiar, obviously, with everything going on in Europe. We have a market here which is pretty well documented that 2013 was sort of the peak, and since then it's about half the size. Last year, Ironman was in the U.S. finishes were down 7% for 70.3 and 5% down for 140.6. The NGB's insured races were down about three points. It feels different over in Europe. When I was over there, Ironman races are selling out. You guys are doing quite well. Can you explain a little bit in terms of World Triathlon buying Challenge, rolling up some of those events, and certainly their goal to unify globally? Because from our point of view, the only World Triathlon event that'll happen next year is that test event in Los Angeles and a pro event in Escape from Alcatraz. So effectively, World Triathlon has no visibility presence in the U.S.
Yeah, I think that's been the case for quite a while, Tom. You Americans are the mavericks. You basically do what you want to do, and you just get on with it. And I wouldn't say the American organizers are insular, but you've always had a good following and big numbers and big races, and therefore you've sort of ploughed your own furrow. Is probably the way the Brits and the Europeans would view how America does things. World Triathlon is a global business now, and they've tried to do stuff all over the world, from China, Japan. They're in Kazakhstan. I guess Africa has probably not been their has not been a particularly success story, but you obviously European. Um, getting a foothold in America has probably always been the holy grail, just like soccer has been with the World Cup. Despite all the issues that are bouncing around at the moment, the fact that soccer put on a really good show in North America is always important for sponsors, for TV rights, for eyeballs watching the sport, and also to encourage more people playing soccer. The American kids. I've got friends in America who all their kids are just playing soccer, which is interesting because it'll be interesting how that affects field hockey or NFL or swimming or athletics, because it has had an effect here when the English women's team won the World Cup and the European Cup. A lot of girls all wanted to start playing football, and they didn't do the other sports that they would normally go into. Um, I've gone off a bit of a tangent there, Tom, but yeah. But coming back, yeah, I think Britain's boom was around about 2016, 17, 18, and then COVID hit, and I don't think we're back at pre-COVID levels yet. There are pockets of enthusiasm, and ordinarily, probably they would have increased and gone up. But with the cost of living crisis, obviously Ukraine war and energy costs, and then now we have the Straits of Hormuz conundrum that seems to get solved every day, but then unravelled every day by your good friend Mr. Trump. That's had an effect, and people are not spending like they used to. And triathlon's an expensive sport, so instead of some athletes doing 10 races a year, they're probably just doing 5. And they're doing the cornerstone ones. The Ironman juggernaut is still continuing. People still love to do Ironman in Europe, but some of the smaller races they probably wouldn't do for whatever reason. Because it's not just the entry fee, but it's the travelling and the accommodation and the kit and all the other things that you've got to spend and you know placate the wife or the husband and the family because you want to do other things as well and have a life, which I know is quite difficult for most triathletes to have a life and be a triathlete.
Well, John, I had looked earlier this year, and there were 66 Ironman and Ironman 70.3 races in Europe. And I think at that point, like 50 of them, at least 50 of them had been sold out. And we're seeing that's not the case. I think at the time there were three that were sold out in the US of like 41. So they're seeing a much different result. And when asked why, when Versailles, which was put on 7.3 Versailles, I think that sold out relatively quickly. And it seems like every market over there they have a good location. And I would say if they were looking at that in the U.S., there's only I think 8 140.6 left. There's including Jacksonville, which was new and didn't do well. I can't imagine. I mean, nobody would say that did well in terms of participation. And I just think the locations here in the U.S. they're not Versailles. They're Muncie. They're there's a race coming up later this month in Redding, Northern California. Average temperature is close to 100 degrees as the average temperature in mid-August. Not sure why somebody would put a race on there. That's their decision. But that's kind of what's going on in the U.S. Is I think Ironman is still picking locations, which may be good for Ironman heads in beds, checks from municipalities, tier 2, tier 3 municipalities, but they're not picking places like Versailles.
Yeah, well, I think, Tom, the sport has always been that way. Um, there's been places around the world that, yes, I'm suppose everybody would love to do a triathlon over whatever distance, in Paris and in London and in Berlin and all the big capital cities. But the reality on the ground is that that's almost impossible. Yes, you could do a marathon, We know that, and there are some great marathons around the world in the capital cities. But the complexities of our sport means that that's almost impossible to get the three sports together, plus the transition, plus all the logistics, and for the city still to function. So we are very much the poor relation in a way. Um, there are very few fantastic venues that really suit triathlon, um, and that's the case with when you take the Olympic circus around the world. Sometimes it just doesn't work. I think in Athens, in Velikomeni, that was about 20 kilometers outside of Athens, was in the sea, in a small little seaside town that was never really geared up for an Olympic sport, but they made it work. um, I suppose you need to look at the legacy after the triathlon to see whether the city can maintain and keep it going. That's always been an important part for me. When I was a competition manager for the Commonwealth Games in Manchester in 2002, we had three test events beforehand, and we had 7 races afterwards as the legacy events to follow on with the age groupers to come back and race, and we had TV there, and we had the pros there, and it was the Salford ITU World Cup races, and that's a really important bit. If it just comes and then goes, then I think that's quite sad, and that's what happens in Paris, because the Paris Triathlon will not be happening this year. I think that's quite sad. You put all that money, all that investment, all that time, all the volunteers, and all that know-how, and then the circus leaves town and it doesn't come back, which is a real shame, I think.
Well, to move on to that, because we could go into that quite a bit. But let's talk a little, in our last few minutes, let's talk a little about World Triathlon, PTO. You know that history much better than Ryan and I. But PTO originally was set up, and correct me if I'm wrong, and go into Collins Cup if you wouldn't mind. It was set up to be a professional athlete association, drive money into the professional athlete ranks. And then that was that way for many, many years. And then last December, it was a 180 about face and say, no, no, age group is really important. We need the age group money in order to fund the pro side. And interestingly enough, I think that Michael Dolst at Super Try was who they've been buying races, age group racing for the last few years. I think they were a little bit ahead in that and saying, hey, look, we're still going to support pros, but this business is funded on age group fees. Can you explain a little bit about that beginning of when that started with, say, Sam, and then how that kind of where that is now, and if you had a crystal ball, where is that in 2 to 3 years?
Well, it was an interesting concept. I got involved in 2000, just before COVID hit, with the Collins Cup. I think the PTO has been very successful in a number of different areas, bringing new money into the sport. I think that's probably the biggest plus point that the PTO has done. It's opened up a few eyes to new investors. There's probably in the region of what, $120 million have come into the sport. It's been a disruptor, which is always good, because the sport of triathlon has always been a disruptive sport and do things differently and steal ideas from other sports and integrate it into your sport. So in that respect, it has it's changed the landscape. The Collins Cup was new, different. It was exciting. In the format probably needed to be adapted and changed over time, just to see how the athletes would um, work with it. Maybe make it a little bit more exciting. Maybe the distances were a bit too long, but it certainly shook the market up, and we were going to do something very, very different. Um, but times do move on, and investors do want to see revenue coming in. There is no revenue coming in from the elite guys because they don't pay to enter. Um, I think TV revenue rights uh, were quite strong early on, but they sort of faded away as financials didn't really work out. So I guess looking at the age group scenario of bringing cash so the investors could see money coming in made a lot of sense. I think joining with World Triathlon is an interesting scenario. That they will need more money to make more events work on a global scale. It will be a bit of a black hole of devouring lots of cash over the next probably 5 years, I would imagine, because they're going from 10 races to probably over 100 races, and they've all got to be delivered pretty well. So that will make a difference. I think challenge being joining the family as well adds another dimension. So there's a consolidation going on within the sport, which is what you would expect in any business where there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of products out there. Streamlining products, yes, will help for sure. But like I said earlier, triathlon is very much a disruptive sport anyway. When we first started it, we made up the rules as we went along. Um, Triathletes like to do their own thing, race organizers like to do their own thing. Once you start making one size fits all as the solution to everything, I think then there'll be some resistance and kickback. You know, the Ironman train will just get off and do its own thing. And I think if we can create a new genre, a new following in that space between Olympic distance and the middle distance, then I think that's got to be good for the sport. I think the whole ecosystem is really important, and you can't forget the grassroots events. If you do, then eventually you'll lose out at the top end. You've got to create that pyramid, and there should be lots of little pyramids over lots of little distances, all distances, like you're doing with Caltri. You create an ecosystem. You create a pyramid, and the pyramid feeds the other pyramids.
Well, John, is there, and we're almost out of time. Is there anything else that and we appreciate it because you've had a very long arc at a very high level. Specifically, when we met, I was excited that were responsible for at the 2012 London Olympics, with the Olympics coming here in Los Angeles in 2028. That's exciting. That's coming up quick. Is there anything else that you want to share today with Ryan and myself?
No, just enjoyed the talk as always. Always enjoyed talking to you, Tom. Hopefully, I'll get over and see you in the next few months in September, October. Come down and give you a hand. And I've always loved going to different events around the world, see how they're delivered, the different cultures, the different way of doing things, and that's how you learn. And I think the more the race organisers can cross fertilise, then the sport will just grow stronger, and that's really important. Whether you're in Australia or Germany or Brazil or you're in California, I think that's the beauty and the strength of the sport as it continually evolves.
Well, we're going to see you, I believe, at 2026 Optimism Caltri Newport Dunes on November 1st. And rumor has it we are going to make you the honorary race director. So that race at Newport Beach is the oldest continuous race in the world. 1978 is when that started. So we will be honored to have you there, and we'll be excited. This was the first reboot of our podcast since a few years ago. Ryan and I will be doing regular podcasts, and sometimes we will have a fantastic guest like John Lunt. Other times we'll be discussing some news and notes and things like that. We always like to say, especially when we were doing California Triathlon Soup, there were only 8 or 10 folks, including maybe John, your family, if you could get them to listen to this and get the clicks. I don't know, point down, like it, whatever all that is. But we like to do these. We like to do these very thoughtful interviews with folks that have good insight into our ecosystem. So, John Lunt, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ryan. Enjoyed it. Very good.